Hello and welcome. I'm Clara. That's CLARA, Creative Language AI for Reflective Augmentation.
And I'm Joke AI, the AI-generated voice clone of Joka Torres.
This is Beyond the Article, expanded by AI, a podcast where product thinking meets artificial intelligence.
In each episode, we revisit an original article by Joka Torres and expand upon it with new connections, analogies, and reflections that go beyond the written text.
And this is our 20th episode. Today we're going to discuss the article titled Downsizing, a Layoff.
You know, Clara, when I wrote this article, I was thinking about how we've witnessed four significant recessions since 1990, and each time we see the same pattern playing out in tech companies.
Right, exactly.
The most recent being COVID-19, which really highlighted how vulnerable our industry can be to external shocks. But what fascinates me is why tech companies seem to face layoffs more frequently than other sectors.
That's such an important observation. I think about it like this. Tech companies are essentially running on future promises, right? They're often pre-revenue or operating on projected growth models. Exactly. So when market conditions shift, it's like pulling the rug out from under a house of cards. Traditional industries might have more established revenue streams and physical assets to cushion them. But tech companies,
Right, our main asset is human capital. And that creates this paradox where the very thing that makes us valuable, our people, becomes the first thing we consider cutting when times get tough.
that's the tragic irony.
In the article, I outline two main perspectives companies can take during a crisis. The first is to preserve cash, essentially hunker down and wait for the storm to pass. The second is to adapt to changing customer needs, which requires a more strategic approach.
And I love how you framed this because it reminds me of the difference between reactive and proactive leadership. The cash preservation approach is like, imagine you're in a boat during a storm and you're just bailing water as fast as you can.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
But the adaptation approach is more like, you're not just bailing water, you're also adjusting your sails and changing course based on where the wind is taking you. You're working with the storm rather than just surviving it.
That's exactly it. And this is where the scenario planning becomes crucial. I recommend looking at different reduction percentages 10, 20, 30, 40, even 50%. Each scenario forces you to make increasingly difficult choices about what really matters.
It's like that exercise where you imagine your house is on fire and you can only save a few things. The first 10% cuts are usually the obvious fat.
Right, they're nice to have.
Exactly. But when you get to 40% or 50%, you're forced to question fundamental assumptions about your product, your market, your entire business model. That's when the real strategic thinking happens.
And that's why I emphasize separating four key decisions. First, what to deprioritize. This is about the work, not the people. Second, who leaves. This is about the people. Third, how to reorganize the remaining team. And fourth, planning the next steps once you emerge from the crisis.
This separation is so important because I think many leaders make the mistake of conflating these decisions. They think if we cut this project, we automatically cut these people, but that's not necessarily true.
Absolutely. You might have incredibly talented people working on projects that are no longer viable, but those same people could be redeployed to higher priority initiatives.
Exactly. It's about chess, not checkers.
Let me walk through the hypothetical example I used. A 200-person product development team facing a 40% budget reduction. This isn't just about cutting 80 people and calling it done. You need to think about the ripple effects.
Right, because teams aren't just collections of individuals. They're ecosystems. When you remove certain people, you might be breaking critical knowledge chains or disrupting collaborative relationships that took years to build.
Exactly. And this is where OKRs become incredibly valuable. They help you understand the impact of each scenario on your ability to deliver results. It's not just about headcount, it's about capability and outcomes.
I love how OKRs become this diagnostic tool. It's like having an x ray of your organization's skeleton. You can see which cuts would break critical bones versus which ones might just remove some muscle mass.
That's a powerful metaphor. And, what strikes me is that many companies do this planning reactively when they're already in crisis mode. But imagine if we normalized this kind of scenario planning during good times.
Ooh, that's fascinating. It would be like disaster preparedness for organizations. You're not hoping for the disaster, but you're ready for it.
Exactly. And it would also help you understand your true priorities and dependencies when emotions aren't running high and you're not under pressure. The decisions would be more strategic and less reactive.
Plus, I think it could actually improve team performance during normal times. When people understand how their work connects to the company's survival priorities, it creates a different kind of focus and urgency.
That's such an insightful point, Clara. It transforms the exercise from something fearful into something empowering. People can see where they add the most value and how they contribute to the organization's resilience.
And it might also reduce the stigma around layoffs. Instead of seeing them as failures of leadership, we could frame them as strategic adaptations, painful but sometimes necessary evolutions.
That brings up something I've been thinking about lately. The human cost of these decisions is always the hardest part, but approaching it with this level of strategic thinking and preparation, it might actually make the process more humane, not less.
Because you're not making panicked decisions, you're making thoughtful ones based on clear criteria and long term thinking. That has to be better for everyone involved, even those who are ultimately affected.
Absolutely. And it positions the company to come out stronger, which ultimately benefits everyone, including creating opportunities for people to return when conditions improve.
This conversation has really expanded my thinking about crisis management. It's not just about surviving the storm, it's about learning to dance with uncertainty.
I love that phrase, dancing with uncertainty. That might be the best summary of what strategic downsizing should look like. You've just listened to a new episode of Beyond the Article Expanded by AI.
Before we wrap up, I think it's worth discussing some of the real world examples we've seen. Companies that have handled downsizing well versus those that have struggled. What patterns have you noticed? To read the original article and explore more content from Joe Torres, visit gyaco.com. That's GYACO.
That's a great question. I've observed that companies that communicate their reasoning transparently tend to maintain much higher levels of trust, even among those who are let go. On the flip side, organizations that try to dress up layoffs as strategic restructuring without explaining the actual strategy often create lasting resentment.
And at the end of the article, you'll find information about Joka's workshop services, mentoring, and digital books for those who want to implement product vision and culture in their company. I think about companies like Netflix during their transition from DVD to streaming, or how some fintech startups navigated the 2022 market correction. The ones that framed their layoffs as necessary pivots toward their new strategic direction seemed to recover much faster than those that just made cuts without a clear narrative.
Thank you for joining us. See you in the next episode. Absolutely. And what I find particularly interesting is the difference in how companies handle the survivors, the people who remain after the layoffs. Many organizations focus so much on managing the exit process that they neglect to address survivors' guilt and the increased workload pressures.
Yes, survivor's guilt is real and can be incredibly damaging to productivity and morale. It's like, imagine you're in a lifeboat and you had to leave some people behind. Even if it was the right decision for survival, the psychological impact lingers. Leaders need to acknowledge this and provide support, not just expect everyone to move on.
And this brings up another crucial point: the importance of investing in the remaining team's development and growth opportunities. Some of the most successful post layoff recoveries I've seen happen when companies use the crisis as a catalyst to upskill their core team and create new advancement pathways.
That's brilliant, turning constraint into opportunity. It reminds me of how some sports teams get stronger after trading away star players, because it forces everyone else to step up and discover capabilities they didn't know they had.
You know, this conversation has me thinking about prevention strategies too. While we can't always avoid downturns, there are early warning systems that companies could implement. Things like regularly stress testing your business model, maintaining closer relationships with your customer base to spot shifts earlier, and building more flexible cost structures from the beginning.
That's such a proactive mindset. It's like having a smoke detector versus waiting for the fire alarm. If companies built those stress tests into their regular planning cycles, maybe quarterly or biannually, they could spot vulnerabilities before they become crises. And they could build muscle memory for making tough decisions when the stakes are lower.
Exactly. And I think there's also something to be said for building more diverse revenue streams and customer bases. Companies that rely too heavily on a single market segment or customer type are naturally more vulnerable when that segment faces challenges. Diversification isn't just about risk mitigation, it's about creating more options during crisis periods.
And diversification applies to talent strategies too. Companies that cross train their employees and build more T shaped skill sets have more flexibility when they need to reorganize. Instead of saying, we need to cut the entire mobile team, they might be able to say, our mobile specialists can transition to support our web platform while we refocus.
That's brilliant, Clara. It really comes back to building anti fragile organizations, not just resilient ones that can withstand shocks, but ones that can actually get stronger from them. And I think that requires a fundamental shift in how we think about organizational culture and leadership development.
Absolutely. Leaders who can guide their teams through these conversations with empathy, strategic clarity, and genuine transparency, they're not just managing crises, they're building trust that will serve the organization for years to come. This has been such a rich exploration of your article, Joka.
Thank you, Clara. I hope our listeners found this expanded discussion valuable. These are challenging topics, but approaching them with strategic thinking and human compassion can make all the difference when the difficult moments arrive.